And I have to admit, I actually preferred them to Yoshi's Island. Okay, now, I am a huge roleplay game fan. I have a massive RPG collection myself, and one of the things the randomised gaming team we all agreed is that RPGs are not very good to put on the channel because often the opening starts are full of long cutscenes. This is the turn-based tactical RPG. It looks side-on live action. It's actually turn-based. There is stilted, so it's slightly odd. It's from T&E Software, and it's actually developed by game freaks of Pokemon fame, and it was actually done by the Pokemon designer who did the character designs in this as well. This is Bushi, in case you're wondering. All links will be down in. I'll link to all the game names in the description as well, so if you want, and time to stamp. But this is an absolutely fantastic sort of tactical RPG. I've been meaning to actually do just a quick gameplay video on the channel at some point, but as you can see, it looks visually very, very impressive. So keeping with the RPG theme going forward, and there will be quite a few more RPGs as they are very much the late life system games. This is Seiken Densetsu 3, better known to you and me as one of the games in the Mana series. Now, annoyingly, fans have dubbed this Secret of Mana 2, but that would be a very incorrect title because they don't tend to use sequel numbers in the Mana series, and if you're a real fan of the series, you would know that. This would have in fact been called Crystals of Mana, which is the thing of the story because you go around fitting crystals, and it's actually a prequel, hence why it shouldn't really be called 2, to the original Secret of Mana, or Shukenai Densetsu 2. This is a phenomenal game. Visually, it's stunning. I'm actually slightly spoiling stuff here because this is from my completed save file right before the final boss with the dragon battle. Oh, that was the path we did because I used Duncan as my main character in this playthrough. But there are actually 3 different final bosses. I mean, this is a absolute tour de force of a game. Shame it never got a Western release. It is visually one of the most impressive games on the Super Nintendo. The graphics are outstanding, and it puts just about every modern day pixel art game to shame with how goodly drawn the animation and characters are in this. And the size of it as well. You need to do 3 playthroughs if you want to see everything. And to think they fit it all on one Super Nintendo cartridge, kudos to Squaresoft as they were at the time for doing this. I just wish they would copy this format for making a sequel on PS4. I mean, this is the gameplay format was ideal. I don't know why they haven't sequeled the Mana games just using this and Secret of Mana's gameplay. That's what we want. From a live action RPG to a tactical RPG, this is Ogre Battles. Again, this is another late Super Nintendo game, and it's been ported to countless systems and even remade on the PSP. I've got a 2-minute stint here of one of the battles. I had to chop and change. One of the problems with games like this is they're quite slow paced, so you literally have to record an hour of footage just for one battle. The raw footage of this to even get a half decent section from this fight is about 20 minutes. Tactics Ogre, Let Us Cling Together is the subtitle, based on a Queen song actually, the subtitle. Fantastic game. I mean, you can get it on so many systems. This is the SNES version was the original release, and then they pretty quickly ported it to Saturn. It later got released on PSP. Visually, not the most impressive game, but I wanted to show it as how the OSSC handles a sort of isometric game. And you have that nice rain effect as well. So certainly this is one, perhaps not the most visual thing, but just to see how it handles this type of game. Okay, I'm being a bit cheeky slotting this one in. This is Violinist of Hameln, which is a fairly obscure Enix platformer released in, again, late 1995. It was based on the manga of the same name, although it takes some deviances with the story. But again, it's a really impressive visual Super Nintendo game and actually has a fantastic soundtrack. So I'm not going to say too much, let you listen to the music and watch the gameplay. Okay, this is Super Strike Eagle from MicroProse, and anyone who's played this game on Super Nintendo will know what a tour de force it is with Mode 7 visuals. And this is one of those games that really does show off the Super Nintendo, so I was interested to see how the open source scan converter actually handled it visually. And I have to admit, I am very impressed with the end results of all the footage we've actually taken, and I've not had too many problems, aside from the resolution changes, which is, on the SNES it's not too bad. I think I will do a comparison look at all the various consoles. I think with the Saturn it's going to be very problematic, but with the Super Nintendo, it's because there's so few games that do resolution changes. In fact, Power Drive is one of the few that has the SNES high res mode, so I was able to show it. It's going to be interesting, but this with the Saturn and stuff, I do think perhaps not so compatible, but certainly interested to see how it'll be. But for the SNES, I think I've been very impressed with the footage, and it's worked with everything I've thrown at it so far. I need to test with a few more Power games, because Power games do use some weird and wacky resolutions in comparison to the US ones, but so far all the Power ones, and I've used a few wacky resolution Power games, seem to have been fine. Certainly I might be able to improve the footage slightly if I adjust some of the options on the open source scan converter, although I must admit the options themselves, there's not like a test card when you're looking through the signal. There's a test card when you start it up, but there's not one to check the actual signal input and adjust it there. Basically you need something like an EverDrive caps, and then you need to have the test program, and then you can configure it there, which is a bit of a rigmarole because it's not ideal if you just want to use original games, because you can't use original games, you need an EverDrive in the test suite program. So from a configuration point of view, I do think the open source scan converter could be slightly better. You do really need the remote. It is horrible to config without the remote. But I won't say too much more on that just yet, because this is Far East of Eden Zero. This is a really impressive Super Nintendo game. It actually uses the SPC 7110 chip, or 7110 chip, or 7110 chip. Basically, it allowed it to capacitate about 100 megabytes of data. It also has an internal clock. It's a huge game, and there are just so many graphical effects in this game. I'm not going to show any gameplay, I'm just going to show you the opening intro. Because I think the opening intro shows you more effects in one 4-minute slot, basically, than I can do in 10 minutes of me running around chopping up enemies, casting spells, as you're going to be looking at the same enemies from the same regions. But visually, this is an incredibly impressive Super Nintendo game. This was one game I was really interested to see how the open source scan converter handled it, because it is so impressive. And I should just make a mention, there is actually 2 opening intros. If you let it run, it will play the attract again with some slightly different interjected cutscenes, but this is just the first attract version. So from one special chip game, that was Far East of Eden Zero, which I highly recommend as an RPG, although it's a bit difficult to play through. You do need a guide really, although there are quite a few guides on the net now, and I've been using both a video guide and a written guide to play through. This is Star Ocean, which has an absolutely phenomenal soundtrack, and this uses the SDD1 chip, and it's from developed by Tri-Ace and published by Enix. This is probably one of the best games in the Star Ocean series. The series itself has had its ups and downs, but visually this is an incredibly impressive Super Nintendo game, hence why I wanted to show it, because again, this is one that really is going to really test the open source scan converter with how it's going to handle these sort of visuals. This is what annoys me with a lot of these videos. They do only show you the sort of commoner games. You think, well, actually the more ones that really push the SNES to the limits, you really want to see how it handles them, because the lighter games, they're likely to work okay. The only issue I did have, and I should mention this, is I actually have two SCART leads. One SCART lead, the open source scan converter, didn't seem to like that much for my NTSC SNES, because it would actually change hertage. I think how it was handling bright flashes was slightly different. This is my other SCART lead, and this maintains a constant hertz frequency, so do check that. If you have one or two SCART leads, check. You shouldn't be getting hertz frequency changes unless there's a resolution change. It should pretty much maintain a constant resolution. So do be aware of that in case you need to buy new SCART leads, because it shouldn't be constantly changing. It should maintain a constant hertage. Okay, on to the other SDD1 game, I should say, and this was Street Fighter Alpha 2 from Capcom. Visually not as good as Star Ocean. It's basically a cut down arcade port with some loading times at the start of the matches, but certainly an impressive one to test out. This is the Japanese version. There's Street Fighter Zero 2 instead of Street Fighter Alpha 2. But this was one game that was giving me inconsistencies on the SCART. This is the game I actually noticed the issues, because those bright flashes you see in the intro, and when you were doing sunrise finishes, that's when I was getting the hertage change on my other SCART, and that's when I changed it. And my other SCART kept all the flashes, everything at the same hertage. It was about 60.08, I believe, for the other. My good SCART maintained it, as the other SCART was actually giving me a higher frequency at some points. There's a quick clip of me playing as Ryu, fighting through a few fights. It's used a slightly different resolution to some games, and it's nice to show as I want to showcase a one-on-one fighter, but visually it just doesn't look as good as the Saturn's version or the arcade game, to put it mildly. But I can't fault the gameplay. The SNES version plays just as well as them. The only chipset I didn't test that would have liked to is the OBC1. That's Metal Combat SD Falcon Revenge, and that's a Super Nintendo scope, and although we have it, I'm not going to be able to show you much, as you can't use the scope on the open source scan converter, not yet anyway. Although there may have been workarounds with switching and various SCART things, but we don't have that set up just yet to do that. Right, so our final four tests actually come from the Super Game Boy, and I'm going to show you, this is actually an interesting one. This is the Western release of Space Invaders with the Super Game Boy support. It's also a very interesting one because you'll notice there was the arcade option there, and I was going to explain this in a future video, which I'm probably going to need to re-record the footage for now that we picked up an open source scan converter. But I wanted to show the Super Game Boy now. Well, this is actually the Super Game Boy 2, I should correct myself there. And the reason I want to show Super Game Boy 2 is because this has better emulation than the original Super Game Boy. However, it's still not perfect, and I've seen quite a few people do RGB classes and digital videos, and things saying, oh yeah, this is the tech stuff. And actually, a lot of them haven't reported that the Super Game Boy 2 does still have a lot of bugs. And in fact, a few of the games I'm going to show, because this is actually a really late Game Boy game here. We've got the original Mega Man Xtreme, which you see is 2000. It was actually released after the Super Game Boy 2. And it's actually got some graphical glitches. You should see flashes on screen at a few points where Mega Man's having flashbacks. Some show, some don't. This one doesn't actually have a Super Game Boy supported border, but it does support the Super Game Boy, because the original Mega Man Xtreme is a standard Game Boy cart with slightly different colours. It looks nicer on the Game Boy Color with the Game Boy Color support, but you can play it on the Super Game Boy. Well, the second one does not support the Super Game Boy. It's Game Boy Color only. But yeah, you did see a few graphical corruptions, and yes, this is also what happens with that text, what happens when you don't have your translators talk to the people who've written the previous story. So Vile is mistranslated as Vava. I'm not sure whether Vava is supposed to be his original name, although Vile's actual name should have been ripped from Boba Fett. But you can see that the open source scan converter does handle the Super Game Boy again very nicely on the Super Game Boy 2. But there are one or two glitches I've seen in a few games, and this is actually Gargoyle's Quest 2, The Demon Darkness. This was not released. This was a sort of follow-up to the NES one. Basically, they did the NES version and then they released it on Game Boy. And this Game Boy version actually has 2 additional stages and a couple of additional items. And there was actually a slight graphics glitch you may have seen when it's scrolling up. And again, that's not on the Game Boy, so that's again another issue with the Super Game Boy 2. So yes, the Super Game Boy 2 is not as good as some people make mention. It does still have some emulation flaws. Not as many as the original Super Game Boy, but it does still have quite a few flaws. And with a short showcase of 2 games, I found minor bugs with them that aren't present when you play it on a Game Boy or Game Boy Color. Okay, and lastly we come to another extremely late Game Boy game, and this also supports the Game Boy Color. This is actually 2001, this is Star Ocean Blue Spear, and technically this could also be regarded as the last Star Ocean, as this was the last one the original team all did. So they did the PS1, they did the SNES one, and this was basically regarded as sort of the third one. It's actually really good, because after this one the series did go down in quality substantially, and the less said about the remake of the original, the third and the fourth and the fifth installments, probably the better. This is one series that I think is diminishing returns isn't an understatement. It's like play 3, play the first 2 and this one and forget the rest. It's also effectively a pseudo spin-off of the Tales of Phantasia series, as it was developed by a large number of the same team who left the Wolf team after Namco did Tales of Phantasia and then set up Tri-Ace to do Star Ocean series. But as you'll see from the animation, this is a visually very, very impressive Game Boy game, and one that I really wanted to, because this really does put the Super Game Boy 2 through its paces. And this one I didn't actually have any faults with, but then this one, as you see, has a Super Game Boy border as well, so I think obviously the team behind it actually developed it for the Super Game Boy, just in mind, despite the fact it supports Super Game Boy and Game Boy Color, and this is 2001, so the Super Nintendo was long gone in the West when this came out. Again, this is, I should say, this is also Japan only, so you cannot get this in the West either, but basically it's the fact it supports Super Game Boy. Even in Japan, the Super Game Boy was sort of, SNES was well and truly on death's door in about 2001 when this came out, but it's nice that it supported it. And this is also the final game in the showcase. So as Star Ocean's wrapping up the footage of this, I'm just going to say, overall so far I've been very impressed, certainly with the Super Nintendo support of the open source scan converter. I could probably have slightly tweaked the footage to get slightly better quality. There's some slight, I've noticed some ribboning and stuff, and I think if I adjust the settings I could probably get it better. And really annoying to adjust the settings because there isn't a decent test card for the open source scan converter unless you have like the 240p test suite on Super Nintendo, which you need an EverDrive for. That's a bit annoying. I was hoping that the scaler would have those some adjustments to sort of help you adjust the frequency without having to buy external devices, and that's perhaps a slight letdown with the open source scan converter. It should allow you to sort of see this. You should be able to adjust the configuration a bit more without needing external test devices. You can of course adjust everything, but it's literally you adjusting stuff in the dark then with the settings. And I know when I was fiddling around with a few of the settings, certainly on the Saturn, when you adjusted one of the frequency ones, which a lot of people did adjust on some consoles, on the Saturn, the minute I started adjusting it, it took the Saturn off spec and nothing would then capture it. So I had to make a note of the actual default settings and then adjust accordingly. Now, I'm going to do a series of these videos. If you want to see more, let me know. But we will, I think, do compatibility tests with a number of consoles. Taking some N64 footage, very good. The Saturn and the PlayStation are a bit more interesting because they do change a lot of resolutions in that. The open source scan converter, like the FrameMeister, doesn't handle resolution changes as well as it could do. I realise it's a tricky thing, but it should try and be almost seamless, and at present it isn't quite. Everyone I've seen largely do videos seems to have small collections of games. That's why I purposely picked a huge number of games, and I purposely picked games that a lot of people, you might not necessarily have them, but these are a much more wider scope and spec of games, because a lot of these are late-end life games that push the SNES or the Super Famicom to its limits, and I really wanted to show that. So I hope you've enjoyed the showcase of some more interesting games. I'll basically let your eyes be the judge. Did you like our footage? Have you liked the games we've shown here? Do you think, would you be interested in an open source scan converter for your Super Nintendo based on the footage shown here? Been very impressed with the output so far. I'm doing a power test separately. So far the power test has been pretty much the same as the US NTSC test, and I'm interested. I'll test with a few more power games, but I will do a power one video, follow-up video as well, and then we'll test with some other systems. But I think so far I've been very impressed. I mean, it's not entirely cheap. It cost me £140 from Amazon, but I think for the price it's definitely worth it. Okay, that's me done and dusted. Thank you for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. As always, please do, if you like this video, please do hit that like button. If you've enjoyed our content and want to see more open source scan convert stuff, please do let us know. Please do subscribe to the channel as well if you enjoyed our content. That is me and Randomized Gaming signing off for now.